technology, software developers in Kenya. There seems to be a war going on, and causes and solutions is what we're looking at this morning. And we're joined in the hot seat by George Njuguna. George is a Director Information Technology with Safaricom PLC. Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here this morning.
You're in the hot seat this morning.
Clearly, I'm already feeling it.
Oh, my goodness. Well, and in addition to that, we're talking about something that seems to have some folks in the certain field a bit anxious. The war for software developers. The question, I think, if we're jumping right into the conversation would be, first of all, there is a war? Is there a problem? Is there a conflict between software developers in Kenya? Paint the picture for us. Yes.
You know, you really must take cognizance of my particular chronological advantage. Yes, my age. So when you talk about software development, first of all, I need to understand what is software.
And now that's what I was asking. I wanted him to paint the picture. Slow, don't worry.
Yes.
As things are slowing down,
software,
also slow down.
You
that's
assume
what
I know what you're talking about.
Okay, that's why I was asking him, if you had allowed me finish, to paint the picture for us in the very beginning of what we are looking at when we're talking about software development in the country, and then why beyond that there is a conflict among the developers.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'll give a bit of context, and because you told me to do a chronological, I'll go back to the first industrial revolution. But I don't think you were there. But I'll get somewhere. I'll build it up. So you look at the 1600s, and the world was now moving a lot. The world was beginning to see how to generate energy to become a lot more efficient and do a lot more. And there the big technology was the mechanical loom. And so what I would be able to do was actually the steam engines would actually be able to see how to build a lot of the mines and all that. So how could steam be used to get energy to do a lot more? Then we started progressing to what you'd have called the age of the big scientific study around how work can be done a lot better. And that's probably around the 1700s to early 1800s, Frederick Taylor time. And so it was about efficiency, and a lot of the conveyor belts were being built. That's when the Ford and all those type of industries came, and scientific management was the big thing. It was how efficient can you be. Then you came to about 1960, where we were now looking at the computer, and it was the age of, I would say, electronic engineering and the chipset. But now you've come today, and it's the age of software.
Right.
And what's becoming apparent now, and you'll hear people say software is eating the world, is software engineering is in every single place. You'll see even places like in Kenya, the judiciary, lands are digitizing. The people behind the solutions that they're using are actually software engineers. According to IDC, which does a lot of research, especially on the technology industry, they estimate that the digital transformation spend by 2023 will be $6.3 trillion. You look at Fortune is forecasting that by 2030, 85 million jobs will be vacant because of lack of proper digital skills, and the revenue loss due to that is about $8.4 trillion.
So how many million again?
$8.4 trillion.
Okay, the number of people who will be out of jobs will be 80 how many?
85
million.
85 million jobs will can't be fulfilled by then.
So CT is already thinking that this software thing perhaps is not very good.
No, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a question of whether I'm willing to understand it and go along with it.
So
yes.
Maybe we can break it down just a little bit, because in this case, you're talking to a gentleman who wants to still go to the bank with his passbook, right?
Why do they issue it if you don't want me to go to the bank with it?
As opposed to, being, and this is what we're talking about essentially, isn't it?
Yeah.
That you can do things, at the touch of a button on your phone. And so the people in the back end, the people who are putting all the nuts and bolts together to allow this technology be a reality in your hand, in a little device, is what we're talking about here.
Yes, so software is in everything you do. If you have a phone, I see you have two smartphones like I do. Definitely every single thing, application that you're clicking on, or you have three, sorry. Yeah. Every single application that you're clicking on has been built by a software engineer. Now, there was a time when I I'm not too old, but when I entered the industry, it was about hardware. And you
Yes.
needed to know how to build computers and build networks.
Yes.
I've pulled cables, I've patched cables. I remember when I entered the industry in the early 2000s, I was connecting people on dial-up. And when you'd hear this sound like a cat being strangled, you knew that the connection had happened. And I could never connect. Why was the sound so screechy and loud?
Actually, explain it. Why was it?
Actually, I never got into it, but I guess the technology at the time, but it did help us because once you had it, you told the customer, Sasa nilipe.
Yeah, I'm done.
Now you're connecting on Wi-Fi and there's no cat screeching and you just walk into a place and you have your connectivity. So we've moved actually from the time of hardware, and that was around the third industrial revolution. People have built the whole circuits, Moore's law, every 18 months. There's a doubling in capacity on compute. Now it's about software, and you got a guy or a girl who doesn't need to go to university, who can just go online because of the democratization of technology, learn a skill in coding, and be able to not just work for one company, but multiple companies building software. And you look at a place like Bangalore. Bangalore has about 4.1 million people employed in their IT industry, and their IT exports are about $53 billion. Bangalore fully is existing and operating because of software. About 90% of the startups in India are coming out of there. You can imagine what impact it would have.
It's ridiculous.
In our economy. Last year alone, we had about 15,000 known people who graduated in Kenya out of colleges and universities with tech skills. But you look at the absorption into the industry, it's not that high. Now, if you say 15,000 known, there's probably way many more thousands who are out there. So if we talk about software, I think it's building stuff. It's sometimes as basic. At the core of it is code. Though right now we're also talking about low code, no code. So I'm sure even anybody else in this room, I'm not pointing fingers, can even say they're a software developer without knowing how to code. So it's actually, and across the globe, you look at Silicon Valley, you look at what's happening in East Europe, West Europe, across the globe, you have these tech hubs coming up. But at the heart of it, really, the core capability there is actually software engineering, software development.
Sure. So then, looking at the Kenyan landscape, what are some of the things that we are looking at that software developers then are actually involved in today? Because you talk about the very low absorption rate of those who have a skill, have gone to school and gotten certification to do one or two things.
Yeah.
But there's a low absorption rate. What are some of the areas that we're looking at that should then be touched on by these folks who have a skill in these areas that are currently not?
So what we're finding, we're probably, and specifically my division is probably the biggest employer of this skill set in the country. So IT team at Safaricom were about close to 800, of which 500-600 are actually software developers. And so we're always recruiting and onboarding. One of the conversations we've been having, and I've been to about 3-4 universities this year, is are you training and equipping these graduates to be ready to enter the job market? And the answer currently to that is you can't say 100% yes. So sometimes the amount of time it then takes us to get that grad ready to build software for an organization takes a bit of time. So last week specifically, we launched the digital industry talent program. And what we're saying, we came together with about 30 organizations, including Standard Group. And we said we're going to each year get about 1,000 people into industry attachments. And what we want them is to get that critical experience so that when they hit the marketplace, not just necessarily to work for us, but even to create jobs, we bridge that gap. I was happy that also we had universities there. And several of them made statements that they're willing to revisit their curriculum so that it is relevant for the current challenges of today. We're talking about skills in I'd say UX, UI, let me break it down, user experience and user interface development. That's what you see when you launch an app and you go through the steps. What's that experience? We say most of the times you should be able to get what you're doing within 3 steps, including a transaction. You're looking at what we call, so that's a lot more on the front end development. There's the back end that you don't see, everything that's happening behind the scenes. Then there's the data science, big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence, integration engineers. So we came up with about 9 areas that robotics, process automation, cybersecurity, areas that we want to take them through a program, a formal program. Part of it is learning, formal training, and part of it is learning on the job. As Safaricom, we've committed 200 of these, of which 100 are going to then be absorbed very likely into the IT team in Safaricom to build solutions for both our consumer business, enterprise, and financial services. So that's the big thing we need to do. Now, if we talk about the war, because that's the elephant in the room.
Yes.
So you got the big tech people have come. It's no secret. You have Microsoft in town.
I was going to say external players.
External players who
Yes.
come into Kenya. And, it's in recognition also that we do have great talent here. And so they've set up their development hub. And from the onset, said we're going to hire 500 people. Now, the easiest place to get good developers in Kenya is Safaricom, because we've been taking our teams through a digital talent program where we even get people from our contact center, network engineering and other engineering functions, reskilled of our 6-month program to become software engineers. And some of these, coincidentally, we've trained, equipped, and as life would be, they've then gone on to work for companies like AWS, Amazon, and Google, as well Microsoft. So where's the war? So we're producing and kind of training people from the grassroots, and somebody else comes into town and begins to offer them.
Pause.
Yes.
Pause.
Yeah.
You train them for your own purposes and for your own advancement.
Yes.
Why don't you just open a school for training people so that you can actually charge them to actually learn, so that it doesn't really matter where they go, because you'll have enough for yourself and there'll be enough for industry.
I think a good point. Our partners, like for example, Moringa School and Strathmore are doing it. So it's not an area we've entered, but we've entered partnerships with people who are doing the training. And more often than not, for our own staff, they go through those joint programs we run with them. But
do these institutions have the capacity to give the actual real life, real situation training that Safaricom can give them?
they are, but through this program we've just launched, we want to strengthen that a lot more and say it's not just Safaricom. We've brought financial institutions. I was happy to see Standard Group there and hear your CEO talk about the capabilities they've built that have even been bought by another similar organization in Zimbabwe. So we actually are realizing this is happening across, and let's not just do it for Safaricom, but create a much wider pool so that the war is not per se, the war is not between getting people from our places or the banks and we are rotating. We actually make the pool a lot broader so that even if a number of guys or girls leave, you're actually able to fill that gap much quicker. So we're starting with 1,000 as our commitment for year one. Wow. But how can we go to 2,000, 3,000, and the more organizations that jump in, maybe we can even be saying 5,000.
What would be the preference? To have homegrown solutions to the software development needs in the country, or to have external players, as you've talked about, coming in and then giving either jobs and or training to the same players or the same individuals in the country? What would be the preference?
So good question. So luckily also as part of the launch, we also had Microsoft there, and the MD of the development center, Catherine Muraga, was one of our speakers as well. So we're saying we're also going to work with big tech, getting on board Google, AWS, Huawei, and the likes. But you ask a fundamental question. I strongly believe that, and I've said this publicly, that the solutions in any community are best solved by the people in that community. So if you're experiencing something in some, let's say, remote or non-remote part of Kenya, you're the one who know where it bites the most, where it hurts. And you can come up, and most innovation that comes from a community is actually lasting innovation. They will own it. The person who's developed the solution understands the challenges. Then what do we then do? I think it's working together with industry stakeholders to bring that technology and opportunity as close to the grassroots as possible. So you have people creating, building things, monetizing. Think about a lady who is making some very nice kangas in some part of Kenya, or someone who's making some things out of soapstone. Can they make them, take some pictures, put them on the web, and people start to buy them from all over the world? Just a small example. Be it some of the issues that we're facing on in terms of lack of, be it rain or anything. What solutions can people build in terms of irrigation, in terms of harvesting water? A lot of these at the back end of it, you'll still have software, you'll still have a technology solution. I was in a hackathon at in a certain part of the country.
What a hackathon.
Okay. So we organize, thank you.
For reference.
So we organize these hackathons where you invite software developers in an area, you give them a challenge, and they develop solutions, and they win a prize. So, and we've used these at times to come up with new solutions that we launch in the market. We've used them to identify talent. And I'm quite happy that both within Kenya and Africa, our teams have more often than not come out the winners, if not number one, number two. And so one of the things that we picked, I was in this area, and one of the winning solutions was they built an app where somebody can call for help on domestic violence. And I'd never seen this in a hackathon. But when I dug deeper and we were talking with the county officials, they said, this is actually one of the biggest problems we have in our county. And it takes so long for somebody to get assistance. And so they were linking this up with a call to an ambulance company. And I'm not certain if it ever went to fruition, but it's one of the things that specific county said they'd take. Now, if you're seated at a central place in Nairobi, you would not know or expect that would be the leading idea. But when the judges looked at it, and we looked at the numbers there and the business case that they made, that was actually a very big winning idea.
Yeah.
So to your point, I would rather that we are building solutions that are solving the big problems that we have within Kenya, but also able to export them to other markets as well. Because in Africa, I think we're also stitched together in some way. And when I travel, you do see a lot of similarities between our countries. And I often hear you give a lot of proverbs. I was like, I hope he doesn't ask me which country it's from. But a lot of these proverbs from Africa are very much similar, which shows we have a lot more similarities than differences. If I start building something here, for example, self-driving cars, I don't think that's the biggest problem that we face in Kenya. No. Yeah. We have other things. So it's our developers who will be like, before you talk about self-driving cars, can you just help me put food on the table?
Are we looking at a potential solution then there? Because one of the things that we talk about then is the development. Look, I mean, we could be jumping the horse, jumping, the gun right here, but putting the cart before the horse. But
I like the jumping the horse.
Thank
thing.
you like
yes,
it, right?
Yes.
Couldn't we be looking at a solution essentially? Because we're saying the exportation of this talent then is one thing that we want to say could be done. Yes. Because unfathomable to many would it be that, here we are, you're exporting this talent from little Kenya in East Africa and saying to the world, here we have some of the best talent then when it comes to tech. So we can Kenya can train its own people through companies like Safaricom, train its own people. Yes. But then here you are saying export to other countries where you can learn, where you can harvest from this talent. Isn't that a potential option as well, as opposed to always being on the receiving end of training and sharing of expertise?
We are a significantly net importer of technology. When I look at India, and we can talk about the US, and I don't want to use the examples of Silicon Valley and all that, but just look at India. I mean, India is a net exporter of technology. And not only has it exported technology, they've produced the CEO of Microsoft now, the CEO of Google.
They have exported human resource.
They've now even exported human resource at the highest level of the technology industry globally, the top companies having Indian CEOs. But it really started by them believing in themselves and what they can do and determining that we're going to do this, we're going to build it here. it's extremely difficult. A lot of companies have told me, the big tech, to go to India to sell a solution. Unlike here, where many times people want to first open doors for the big international players before they open for the local ones. But if we begin to believe in ourselves and we begin to build locally, what we did when I joined Safaricom about 3 years ago, the Safaricom app was being done by an external vendor. And we're having lots of issues. And as an IT guy and a leader, anytime that an app is down that people are using, it's for us, it's generating revenue, but customers have become accustomed to it. You just know you're having a bad day.
Yeah.
Having a bad week, and everybody will remind you the way your app doesn't work.
Yes.
And because Safaricom, we're 40 million customers, 30 million active on M-Pesa, you can imagine anytime we have an IT issue, you just want to bury ahead. We're doing about 60 million M-Pesa transactions a day. So even in an hour, having a downtime, you're talking about several hundred thousands going into millions of potential complaints. So one of the things we said on this app, and I remember in one of the last incidents I dealt with, I told the team, why are we not building this thing ourselves? And I said, George, we can. And they built the Safaricom app, and currently it's the highest rated app on stores. It's on both iOS and Android, fully built here in Kenya. We terminated the contract with the foreign vendor. And now the team take a lot of pride when they walk around saying, you know what, this app is done by us. And if I sit here and you probably say, could you consider doing this on the app? We're able to just walk out of here and talk to the team and say, hey, there's a brilliant idea I just picked up.
Yeah.
And we can take it. Now we have people talking to us about building apps for their businesses here. But even as we've gone into Ethiopia, that's a conversation. Can we take the Safaricom app into Safaricom Ethiopia? How we look at our Lipa Mdogo proposition that looks to bridge the digital divide. We partnered with Google. Google did Android, did a small part of it, but it was fully built by our teams. Now that enables somebody to have a smartphone for as little as 500 shillings deposit and paying about 20 shillings a day.
Okay.
Never been done before. In terms of breaking up payments like that for a smartphone daily, because the way we operate many times in Kenya, the cadre of customers, you're used to buying the 5 bob Kimbo. Okay, I don't know, sorry, maybe I'm out of Kimbo, but it's the Kadogo economy.
Yes, you're referring to something generically speaking.
Yes. And so instead of expecting somebody to have 3,000 shillings at the end of the month, can you get them to a 10 bob, 20 bob each day? And as part of it, they're also getting data and voice and other services. That entire solution was built fully in Kenya. The part we got from Google was how to lock certain features of the phone if you don't end up paying. It's more of an incentive.
Okay.
Let
to
me
keep
ask
going.
this.
I would like us to go to a break. We're at 29 to 9 on the nose, to 10 rather, because I think CT has a question, but then also the question of remuneration for, your local who might be tempted to go to the external players because they may offer something more in terms of coins in the pocket. But we'll come back and look at that after this break.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Before we went to the break, rather software development wars in the country. Before we went to break, CT, you had something that you wanted to talk to George about.
What I wanted to find out, I've actually changed my mind. What I wanted to ask, I'm not going to ask. You want to ask a question, and then you have a response, and you figure, why am I asking this question? So I'm going to ask a different question.
For which you don't have a response?
No.
Okay.
If I have a response for it, then I would ask myself, and then I would respond to it myself.
Okay.
Yes, okay. That's how these things work. Okay?
Generally, okay.
So the question I'm asking is this. When you look at the advancement that Safaricom has made, there's something I mentioned in passing about you starting an institution of your own, right? I wasn't just saying it in the most facetious way I could say it. I was saying it with intent. And why I was saying it with intent is this. When you're successful at something, it is you who actually knows what it is that you're doing, and you're successful at it.
Yes.
So even as you associate and you bring in other players like learning institutions, that doesn't stop you from actually doing your own thing. Apart from just the learning institution, these so-called innovation hubs, which I'm sure you must have one, and everything that goes along with it, so that your service becomes a 360 service. Even as you're partnering with others, you're partnering with them, if I dare say so, on your terms, really.
City, you're absolutely correct. So
I am.
You're spot on.
Okay.
if many times, I guess if we look at it, whether we're talking vertical or horizontal integration, so I'm a student of management. Sometimes you say, this is so critical to me, I want to produce it myself. And I can't be dependent on someone. Will they give me as much of it as I want? So we are moving into that space. So we've brought stakeholders together. We're also building the competencies we need to have internally. We've taken about 120 to 180 of our own people through a program that we've built in partnership. Now we're talking about, can we do 1,000? But eventually, and I believe we do need to take up the challenge. Opportunity is big. We see that the competencies are there and all the pieces, because we also like to do things with excellence when we execute. So I do believe that that's a conversation that we cannot put under the carpet. One of the things we did recently, and I don't know if you saw my hoodie, was launch the Safaricom Engineering Community. Decode was the name of the summit. Now we're starting to bring developers across the country. First, we're organizing our own developers and saying, other guys, you can join us.
Yes.
So, and how do we have all these people into one platform? So that I'm looking to get that UX, UI, I hope you remember, experience interface.
And
I know
UX,
that I
UI,
have
yes.
a UX, UI sub-community of 100 people. So instead of advertising and probably having to get someone from even outside the country, I know that these 100 people, part of the community, are available and they are willing to move.
Yeah.
So it's these building blocks are going somewhere. So
Right.
you have the digital academy, you have the talent program, you have the engineering community. All of a sudden, there is something that we're starting to put together that would then link up to what you're recommending.
Looking at, you want to go?
Oh,
Okay.
no.
So,
No. Please.
still looking at the war.
Yes.
Again, and one of the components of this, usually when we're looking at who's trained here, who comes from outside, is remuneration,
Yes.
right? It's very tempting to get the remuneration that an external big tech player would offer vis-a-vis what plays out on the
Yes.
local market.
Yes.
How are you playing with that? And have you seen people leave the offerings that you make for a more attractive, fee that would come from an external big tech player?
To be very honest,
Or are you able to match it?
One of the big reasons they were leaving was pay. I mean, you got someone coming saying they're doubling, tripling your pay.
Yes.
And, as an individual, I sit across the table from someone and I do look at it and I look at what they're aspiring to do. And you say, okay, can I match it? At the time, initially, we were not able to match it. And so we had to lose a lot of good people. Now, the other thing they had was an incentive that if you recommend somebody and they join, you get, I think, around $3,000. So again, you have this young, if they recommend 4 people, and most of the times if you're going to recommend someone, for example, for you, I guess it's your crew over here, so
Yeah.
CT would be one of, I don't know if he's a good, you'd like to carry him
He's a
somewhere
good
else.
fella, this guy. We go.
So
We
you're
go
like, if you
as
get
a pack.
CT a gig,
Yeah.
then you get $3,000.
I take him anywhere,
You
man.
get Eric and whoever. So all of a sudden, you have 1.2 M that you can just walk in and buy a new. And for some of them, it's a new Subaru with 3 exhausts,
Fully loaded.
So, and a subwoofer in the back to add to it. And if you find yourself with an hour gap, you then want to change the what is it called? The little back thing that pops out. I forget. So
We can use that description. It's great.
You're
Yes.
like, let me get another guy. So people
finish the job,
So
yeah.
all of a sudden, you see your entire line in a certain expertise has gone because this one gets this one also is like, oh, anyway. So all of and so we had to do something as Safaricom.
So is that because you're not able in terms of ability or not willing to match?
There was an able part, but also the framework and the policy in able to do it. So I'm very happy that from last year. So every cloud has a silver lining, and I always believe when you face a challenge, it's an opportunity to innovate, and you can innovate also on the HR side. So we came up with something we call the contribution model, where you may be all of the same, you've been trained the same, but what you are able to deliver on the job. For example, I might say, this show is a great show. So you say the people who are on this show versus another show, this show brings a lot more viewers, it's a lot more innovative. So the pay for the people on this show is higher than another show that's probably not bringing...
Repeat that again.
He's hoping somebody hears you.
No, they're listening. I want someone else to say it.
You see, the typical HR practice is you'll say people are put into job bands.
Yes.
And you say, if you're at this job band, this role, this job band, you're all paid the same.
Right.
We flipped that. And we said, in terms of IT, we're going to set that aside. And because that's not what the market and the industry, when we benchmark with the global tech, they're doing.
Yeah.
Somebody could actually be at this level here, maybe a developer, but should be paid like a director because of the skill set, the experience, and what they're able to contribute to the company. So we put that in place last year. We took about 500 people through, and gradually we began adjusting pay. And the organization has continued to do it. But we did have to make a business case. We did need to do the research. Somebody has to do the hard work. And working together with our HR team, we got a lot of buy-in. Some of the other things is, what type of machines do people want to use? They want MacBooks. They want noise cancellation headsets. They want, and
There are such things.
Your life could be significantly better.
And so sometimes, it's not just the pay.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the environment. It's the opportunity for growth. For a developer who sees that the only way for me to grow is to become a senior manager, head of department, director, you're like, okay, why am I staying here?
Yes.
I'll probably never reach George's level. Or I have no desire to deal with the people management and other things George deals with. Me, I just want to code, and I'm very good at it.
Right.
And you can imagine probably the developer who was sending, the developers who are writing code to send people into space. They're paid probably very, very well.
One would imagine.
And probably more than some CEOs.
Yes.
As we're saying, you contribute, and we're going to pay you. You don't need to see only management as the leadership, as the growth trajectory.
Yes.
We can give you a craft, what we call a craft. And we'll talk about, I'll give a quick example. It's a difference between somebody who can make an egg for themselves and somebody who is able to make creme brulee or something very good. So maybe you start at the initial level. Maybe even some people can't make an egg. You can cut a fruit, then maybe you can make an egg. Then you move to the fact that you can host a few guests and they're like, what you've served is palatable.
Yes.
Then you say, I can host probably 100 people.
Yeah.
Then you can work at a good restaurant, and then eventually you can write a recipe. Now, there's a big difference between that person who is writing a recipe and the one who is just a good chef at a restaurant.
Yes.
So that's how we built the craft for each and one of these disciplines. And so moving from what you'd say practitioner, professional level, all the way to expert and master. And now we are resolving the pay differences and adding more incentives. And it's been received very positively.
I can
by the
imagine.
devs.
And this exists in Kenya today. I mean, we have countries who are exporting technology. I think of countries like Hungary, for example, who maybe don't have anything beyond that. But what they're doing in terms of global strides is unbelievable. So here's an opportunity to do the very same thing, but communicating that also is something that is just as important as creating it. Because then who knows that this is possible, if you're not telling of it as often as you can.
Could I ask the question? Do you have situations where people actually leave Safaricom and do whatever it is that they're doing and then eventually come back?
Yes.
See? Because I was thinking that, this narrative of losing people, you actually don't lose people, not really. Because if you are the one who gave them the wings to fly,
Yes.
it doesn't matter where they go. It's your person who is there. It doesn't matter what else they acquire.
Yes.
It's still your person. So your contribution to the industry
Yes.
then becomes almost invaluable.
Absolutely. And,
Yes.
and that's why we decided to, and given the platform we hold and our skill, when we called the industry players together to look at talent, they came. And all of a sudden, this pool of 1,000 that we're training, they're not for Safaricom. They're for all of us. If we get 15,000, they're for all of us. And they can move between this organization, and we're building a microsite where you can just go see anybody. Go see who's there and good in data science. pulling in investors like MasterCard Foundation, who are saying they're willing to train even X million people in Africa in data science at no cost, at their own investment. So how do we get these people? They go, they get the training, we put them there, and then they are skill set, not for an organization, but for the industry. Because ultimately, we need to grow the industry. I'm asking myself, of the $6.3 trillion by 2023 that will be spent on digital transformation, what percentage of that can actually be in Kenya?
Yeah.
Just look at, say, I am taking my mind to what you're saying, and look at these people going right across the globe in whatever capacities they're in, and hopefully rising to certain positions of preeminence and authority.
Yes.
And I'm looking at a situation where you're thinking of networking.
Yes.
With the prominence Safaricom has, you suddenly end up with a situation where you're networking with people you know.
Yes. Yes.
People you've worked with.
Yes.
Does it not make work so much easier?
Absolutely. And I've been so excited. Like, we work a lot with AWS. We host a lot of our solutions on their cloud. We now have a number of engineers from Safaricom at AWS. We're able to have very different conversations. They're also able to explain to AWS why Safaricom is so critical, why you can't have M-Pesa down for 5 minutes. So you then see the relationships changing. And true enough, the fact that so many people from India are actually rising in big tech shows that they were willing to do some export. But also the people in those organizations, I've been happy at my level when I meet senior people. They're like, you know what, George, the engineers we had for Safaricom are fantastic. They're smart. And therefore, you're now seeing even some of those bigger tech companies, as they're looking at talent to hire for Africa jobs, for the very first time, you're seeing them hiring talent from Kenya. And so you'll start to see Kenyans, maybe it might start in Africa or EMEA, what they say, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. But I do look forward to a day where in these big tech companies, you'll have a CEO, CTO, who is actually from Kenya.
Interesting, because when you talk about Bangalore, when you talk about some of these other tech cities around the country, there is, regardless of how minimal, there is the support of government, because there is the realization that this is something that could potentially be an earner for the country, as well as, advertisement for the country on a global scale. Looking at what Safaricom is doing in the country today, what partnerships, what linkages then exist between Safaricom and government to say, let's push this to the highest level possible, with the backbone support, even if it's not monetary, but the backbone support of government is something that is worth it. Do you think?
Absolutely. And, one of the positive things that we had, and even last week when we had the launch, we had the Minister of Labor there. He was so excited. He was sitting at the front seat, and as I was talking about creating jobs, he was like, this is what we want. And even afterwards, he's like, can we do this? Can we do SME portals? Can we get people in? So government is there. Look at the Ministry of ICT. We had PS Jerome Ocheng representing CS there. They are very much there. They're saying whatever you need to do. So the people at the table, we have government, we have industry. We talked about the training institutions. We also talked about, we even had people from manufacturing and employers of Kenya. So we're saying financial services. We're saying all of us need to come together to solve it. But I believe government is seeing the opportunity. I believe the work that's happening at Konza and attracting investors, I think it's a South Korean university that's looking to open and launch there. We're partners in it, that we can't ignore the aspiration to be the Silicon Savannah. Safaricom is the big tech of the region. We have to play a role by giving some form of direction, but we can't do it without government. Government equally is looking to reduce unemployment, inequality, create opportunities, and solve some of the perennial problems we have. For some of us, we're saying software engineering needs to have a lead role in doing it. And I believe as this program unfolds and other programs that are there, you will see a lot of this partnership coming together and becoming a lot more visible.
So even as we wrap that up, I know that, do you have that one burning question, CT?
It isn't exactly burning.
All right.
But it's...
It's the horse and the cart and the gun.
Yes, this
And
one
the-
is
and the
actually
gun.
I'm at the horse. You
Yeah.
see,
Okay.
I'm following up with what I was asking. Do you have in place a scheme where you enable people, not you encourage them to leave, but you don't hold them back and you plan for it so that their leaving isn't someone kicking and pushing and pulling and swearing as they move out, but something that, should we say, is friendly?
That's a good question. So we do. So one of the things we do need to have succession planning, and one of the things that this whole where I found myself about 18 to 24 months ago in terms of talent, I said, hey, I need to be a lot better prepared for it. So broadening the entire pool is important. We did a skills audit and identified, of the X 100 people we had in IT, which are the areas we are green, which we mean we have an abundance of talent, and where are we red and where are we yellow. And we began aggressively getting training, and we talk about, even across the whole organization, a free training program we offer called One More Skill, where people have access to a lot of materials. And then one of the other things, as part of this contribution model, the skills that you've picked and you're able to apply, we'll talk about sometimes people having a T-shaped skill.
Yes.
So maybe you are deep in one area and in another area you're not.
Yes.
But now we're even talking about E. So can you even be deep in multiple areas?
Wow.
And so you're actually cross-functional. You can do a job that potentially 3 different people can do. So such a person becomes a very valuable asset. But also we need to ring fence certain parts of our talent and make them a lot more comfortable and not feeling that they want to get wings quickly, but also putting on them an onus. And we have these things we call chapters.
Yes.
So a chapter is a conglomerate of a group of people with the same skill set. Within the chapter, are you equipping your successor?
Right.
And how can this rotate? That the people within your space, you're kind of a senior coach, mentor to them. And so you're constantly replenishing your talent pool. And so if people do leave, it doesn't catch you with a lot of surprise and, as you said, kicking and screaming.
George Njuguna, an hour is not enough to go through some of these things, but thank you for sharing those insights this morning. It will be great to see the progress of this moving into the future. George Njuguna is the Director, Information Technology at Safaricom PLC. Asante Sana for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much.